So if you were going to launch a movement that would eventually outlast the entire Roman Empire, you'd probably hire scholars,
So
right?
absolutely. Scholars or maybe, kings.
Right. Kings, military geniuses, that sort of thing. I mean, you certainly wouldn't hire a known embezzler, an incredibly impulsive fisherman, and a violent political extremist.
No, you really wouldn't. It's a total HR nightmare.
It is. But the text we're getting into today argues that this exact catastrophic HR nightmare is the very reason the world changed. So, welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one. It's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, so we've taken this stack of historical research, some modern sociological articles, and our core text today, which is The 12 Who Changed the World. And the goal here is to extract a completely different perspective on the 12 disciples.
Right. To look past those, pristine stained glass windows we're all so used to seeing.
Exactly. Our mission for you, the listener, is to really see how 12 ancient, distinctly unqualified, and, let's be honest, often very confused men mirror the exact modern struggles you and I face every single day.
And what's fascinating here is the overarching irony when you stack the ancient context against our modern data.
Oh, yeah. The contrast is wild.
It really is. I mean, the sociological research we reviewed points out that today humanity is more digitally connected than at any point in recorded history.
But we're incredibly isolated.
Exactly. We are experiencing record highs of profound emotional isolation. We have this lightning fast communication, but our attention spans are just, well, they're fractured.
Yeah, fractured is a good word for it. We've got infinite streams of entertainment, but a severe, almost measurable lack of actual peace.
Right. And we desperately want to believe that our modern chaos is, totally unique to us.
Oh, for sure. We think we invented anxiety.
But the historical sources paint a picture of a first century world that was honestly just as chaotic. I mean, just without the smartphones.
Right. They were navigating deep political corruption, widespread violence, toxic religious division. It was an environment of just constant ambient fear.
Which is exactly why their specific psychological profiles are so compelling for us today.
Hmm.
The research really emphasizes that these men weren't, first century celebrities or elite philosophers.
No, they were blue-collar workers, rural outcasts.
Exactly. The radicals, even. And they shifted the trajectory of human history, not through the mechanics of wealth or military force, but through something totally different. The sheer force of truth combined with just an absolute willingness to be transformed.
And I think that establishes the foundational theme of the text right there, which is that God doesn't draft perfect players. He recruits willing hearts.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said.
But, I want to bypass the whole Sunday school summary here and get straight into the psychology of public failure. Let's start with Peter.
Ah, yes, Peter.
Right, because we all know Peter was the loud, impulsive guy. He literally walked on water but sank from fear and ultimately denied Jesus 3 times on the night of the arrest.
Yeah, the ultimate failure.
But what the source extracts from this, and I found this so interesting, is a direct parallel to modern catastrophic public failure. It frames his denial not just as a simple mistake. It's the equivalent of posting your deeply held convictions online, building your whole identity around them, and
The second you face pushback.
yes, the absolute second you face real-world public mockery, you just panic, hide, and literally delete your profile.
It's a complete collapse of your own stated values.
Exactly. So I have to stop here and ask about the mechanics of this. How does the text say Peter actually bridged the gap between a totally devastating public failure and eventually, returning to a position of leadership? Because in our culture today, that kind of collapse, it's permanent.
Right, and it is permanent in our culture because our culture operates on a strict economy of reputation.
Wow, an economy of reputation.
Yeah. I mean, once you bankrupt your reputation, the culture just discards you. You're done.
Yeah.
But the text explains the mechanism of restoration through a completely different economy.
Okay, how so?
Well, when Jesus restores Peter after the resurrection, specifically when he tells him, feed my sheep, he isn't just saying, I forgive you. He is actively recommissioning him.
Oh, right. Putting him back to work.
Exactly. The mechanism of grace here works by reestablishing authority not based on a perfect track record, but on the transparent ownership of failure.
So, wait, you're saying the failure itself basically becomes a prerequisite for the leadership?
Precisely. I mean, the research argues that Peter's eventual authority in the early church wasn't despite his failure. It was actually fueled by the profound humility that his failure produced.
Because he couldn't pretend to be perfect anymore.
Exactly. He could lead broken people because the illusion of his own perfection had been entirely shattered.
Mhm.
God specifically uses fractured people because they no longer rely on their own PR, to survive.
And that reframes leadership entirely. So if Peter is dealing with the internal collapse of his own values, Matthew is dealing with like an external societal label.
Right, Matthew the tax collector.
Yeah, the despised tax collector. He was a traitor in their eyes. And the sociological articles in our stack explicitly link his situation to modern cancel culture.
They do. And to really understand the way of that, you have to look at how cancel culture actually functions mechanically.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, the modern articles point out that cancel culture relies entirely on communal shame to enforce isolation. It's a social contract that basically says, because of what you are or what you've done, the community has revoked your right to exist in our space.
Right. And in the first century, a tax collector working for Rome and, extorting his own neighbors wasn't just disliked, he was ritually and socially dead to his community.
He was a ghost. He was the person society had permanently labeled as toxic.
Like the divorced, the addicted, the canceled today. But here is the fascinating twist the core text presents. When Jesus walks up to Matthew's tax booth and just says, "Follow me," he isn't negotiating with the community.
No, not at all. The text highlights how grace functions as a unilateral override.
Unilateral override.
Yeah, it completely bypasses the community's permission. It works mechanically by substituting the crowd's judgment with the authority of the invitation.
Wow. And Matthew just leaves his wealth, leaves this whole corrupt enterprise behind.
Because someone finally offered him an identity that wasn't tied to his worst decisions. The historical takeaway here is just a massive declaration to you, the modern listener,
Which is?
that no societal label, no matter how permanent the culture insists it is, has the structural power to withstand grace.
I love that. But, internal doubt like Peter's or societal labels like Matthew's, those are deeply emotional obstacles. Let's shift gears for a second.
Sure.
What happens when the obstacle isn't your past, but your own neurological wiring? Because the text spends a lot of time on the highly logical, analytical disciples, the people who need data.
Philip.
Yes, Philip. We know his immediate reaction to Jesus wanting to feed the thousands was purely logistical. He literally starts calculating the cost of bread.
Right. The author uses Philip as the archetype for the limits of human understanding. Philip is running logistics in his head, he's assessing the physical inventory, and logically concluding that the situation is just mathematically impossible.
But I want to push that analogy even further, though. We live in an age of artificial intelligence, right? Predictive algorithms, infinite data. We demand that absolutely everything be quantified.
We do.
So let's say Philip had a predictive AI or a supercomputer in his pocket at that exact moment. The text basically argues that all the processing power in the world wouldn't have helped him.
No, it wouldn't have.
Why? Because algorithms can only calculate outcomes based on the existing physical resources in a closed system.
That is such a brilliant way to frame it. The research points out that faith, by its very definition of these ancient texts, is the introduction of a nonlinear variable.
A nonlinear variable.
Right. Yeah. You cannot put a miracle into a spreadsheet because a spreadsheet requires a closed system.
It does. The math doesn't work otherwise.
And this directly addresses the spiritual exhaustion of our information age. We have the sum total of human data in our pockets, yet people report feeling profoundly empty.
So true.
Philip's historical lesson is that intellect, when operating entirely isolated from faith, just leaves the soul starving. Jesus had to teach Philip that the math only makes sense when you factor in the presence of the mathematician.
Which brings us to the ultimate skeptic, Thomas. And let's group him with Bartholomew, too.
Good pairing.
We all know Thomas demanded physical proof of the resurrection, and Bartholomew sarcastically asks, can anything good come out of Nazareth? But the source material fiercely defends both of them.
It does, because it distinguishes between cynicism and intellectual honesty.
Okay, unpack that difference.
Well, cynicism is a defensive posture. It's a refusal to believe because you want to protect yourself. But Thomas wasn't a cynic. He was allergic to blind faith, sure, but he genuinely wanted the truth.
He wanted to know for sure.
Right. And what the text reveals about the mechanism of their interactions with Christ is that honest skepticism is never treated as a disqualifier.
Right. Jesus doesn't show up and scold Thomas for wanting proof. He offers him the exact reality he requested.
He meets him right where he is.
And I think that's a massive relief for anyone listening right now who wrestles with heavy anxiety. or who feels guilty because their logical brain just won't let them take things on faith.
Absolutely. The underlying premise here is that truth can withstand scrutiny. Sincere searching, even when it sounds like doubt, often leads directly to the most unshakable conviction.
Because when Thomas finally sees the proof, his doubt doesn't just fade, right?
No, it instantly calcifies into the ultimate declaration, my Lord and my God.
Wow. But what about the questions that don't get an immediate physical answer?
Ah, enter Thaddeus.
Mentor Thaddeus, he's the one who asks Jesus this massive structural question, why will you reveal yourself to us but not to the whole world?
That is the ancient equivalent of the problem of hiddenness and, frankly, the problem of evil. It's the exact same question a modern listener asks when they scroll through the news. If God is real, why is the world still full of suffering? Why do corrupt institutions prosper? Why does he sometimes seem completely silent?
And the text points out that Thaddeus didn't receive a neat philosophical textbook answer to that.
He didn't.
The mechanism of faith presented here isn't about acquiring some complete encyclopedia of cosmic answers. It argues that faith sometimes requires the internal resilience to continue the journey while you are still actively carrying incredibly heavy, unresolved questions.
Exactly. It's about trusting the character of the person leading you, even when you don't fully understand the route.
Yeah. Now, carrying internal questions is one thing, but those struggles are mostly quiet. What happens when that internal friction turns into outward aggressive action?
Right, the external clashes.
Because the source text doesn't shy away from the extremists, which brings us to Simon the Zealot. And just to be completely clear for our listener, we aren't taking a stance on any specific modern political culture wars here.
Of course not. We're staying strictly impartial.
Exactly. We are strictly looking at how the source text draws a sociological parallel between first-century political extremism and the climate we see in the data today.
And honestly, the parallel is striking. Simon belonged to a radical, militant political faction.
The Zealots.
Right. And they possessed this intense, boiling hatred for Roman oppression. They were entirely willing to use violence to achieve their political aims. Simon's entire identity was constructed around deep political rage.
And the sociological articles in our stack note that this perfectly mirrors the toxic division we see globally today. Deeply entrenched nationalism, culture wars, people practically destroying each other with rhetoric online.
The temperature's just always kept at a boiling point.
Exactly. So how did interacting with Christ rewire someone so fundamentally radicalized?
Well, the text explains that the transformation wasn't about erasing Simon's passion. It was about redirecting the target of his fight.
Redirection, okay.
Yeah, Christ took a man defined by militant political anger and transformed that exact energy into a spiritual mission. He systematically dismantled the idea that earthly governments were the ultimate source of salvation or destruction.
So he turned a revolutionary's violent anger into genuine, active compassion.
Precisely. And you really have to look at John to fully understand that mechanism of compassion.
John, the disciple of love.
Yes, but remember, John was originally one half of the Sons of Thunder. He was ambitious, emotional, fiery.
Right. He wanted to call down fire from heaven at one point.
Exactly. Yet he ends up being the disciple of love, the one who stood at the foot of the cross when almost everyone else fled, and the one who eventually wrote, God is love.
So what does the historical research illuminate about that transformation?
It shows a radical redefining of love itself. Our modern society often misinterprets love as something soft, passive, or purely emotional. But John's life demonstrates that love is a formidable active strength.
An act of strength.
Yes. It is the exact gritty strength required to heal divided communities, to bridge intense political gaps, and to really short-circuit the endless loops of outrage.
Okay, wait, let me push back on that for a second.
Go for it.
Because that challenges the entire architecture of our modern attention economy. We live in a world that rewards the loudest voices, the most outraged posts, the viral moments. If you aren't visible, you don't matter.
That's certainly the narrative, yes.
Yet the text highlights figures like Andrew and James the Less. Andrew was never the main character. He just quietly brought people to Jesus, like his brother Peter or the kid with the loaves and fish.
Right, he was the connector.
And James the Less literally has zero famous speeches or dramatic stories. He was just faithfully present. So in a culture obsessed with personal branding and metrics, how does the text justify this kind of quiet, unrecorded faithfulness?
The justification comes from a completely inverted metric of success. The text argues that heaven's algorithm operates on the exact opposite principles of social media's algorithm.
Oh, heaven's algorithm. That's good.
We are conditioned by our devices to believe that if something isn't witnessed by thousands of people, it possesses no value. But James Zelles and Andrew represent the hidden infrastructure of history.
It's the ripple effect.
Exactly. The unnoticed kindness, the parent who just shows up faithfully day after day, the worker who operates with total integrity but never gets a viral post. Changing just one single life like Andrew, bringing Peter into the fold, can literally alter the course of generations.
So the sociological implication is that you do not require a spotlight to execute a massive, eternal impact.
Not at all. In fact, the spotlight often gets in the way.
Which brings us to the final and undoubtedly most intense comparison in our stack of sources. If quiet faithfulness is the intended baseline, what is the actual cost of chasing worldly clout instead?
Ah, the extremes of ambition.
Right. The text examines the extreme opposite ends of ambition, starting with James, the son of Zebedee. We know James started out intensely dreaming of greatness, status, and a literal throne.
He wanted exactly what our modern influencer culture tells us to want: ultimate power and recognition.
But the text notes how proximity to Christ completely rewired his definition of success.
It did. James ultimately traded his dream of an earthly, visible throne for the ultimate unseen sacrifice. He became the first apostle to be martyred for the faith.
He abandoned the pursuit of fame for the defense of truth. It's a jarring reminder that while modern society celebrates luxury and branding, James's historical trajectory insists that true greatness has absolutely nothing to do with how well known you are by the masses.
Right.
It has everything to do with how faithful you are to your specific calling.
And that reality is sharply contrasted with the most tragic figure in the entire historical record, Judas Iscariot.
Yeah, the ultimate warning.
The text frames Judas as exactly that, a chilling warning for the modern listener.
The psychology of Judas is terrifying because he wasn't an outsider. He wasn't some distant critic. He walked physically beside Jesus. He heard the teachings before they were ever written down. He watched the miracles happen in real time.
He was as close as you could get.
Yet, the text details how he allowed greed to quietly, slowly metabolize in his heart, ultimately selling out his calling for 30 pieces of silver. How does the research explain that level of disconnect?
The mechanism of Judas's fall is what the author calls proximity without internal reality.
Proximity without internal reality. Wow.
It represents the terrifying truth that you can appear completely spiritually close on the outside. You can know all the vocabulary, sit in all the right rooms, and maintain the perfect outward aesthetic, while internally, your soul is drifting miles away.
He looked the part, but he didn't live it.
Exactly. Judas is the historical proof that chasing money, influence, and power without any underlying integrity doesn't just leave you feeling unfulfilled. It actively and systematically destructs the soul.
It is the absolute highest cost of choosing clout over calling. You can gain the whole world, as the ancient phrase goes, and completely lose your own self in the process.
And that contrast is why the survival of this movement is so analytically fascinating. After the resurrection, the remaining disciples went on to face severe persecution, imprisonment, and mockery.
But they didn't break.
They didn't do it for wealth or status. They did it because their proximity had become an internal reality.
Yeah.
They fundamentally believed it was true.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to bypass the historical analysis for a second and bring this directly back to you, the listener. The reason we examine this specific stack of sources isn't just to recite ancient trivia.
No, not at all.
It's because these psychological profiles are mirrors. Maybe you are sitting there feeling exactly like Peter right now, carrying the crushing weight of a failure you think permanently disqualifies you.
Or maybe you operate like Thomas, burdened by a heavy logical skepticism that won't let you just blindly accept things.
Right. Or perhaps you relate to Matthew, haunted by a societal label or a past mistake that the culture absolutely refuses to let you outgrow.
Or maybe you are exactly like James Zelles, just going to work, serving your family, doing the right thing quietly every single day without a single round of applause from the world.
Whichever profile you fit, this historical narrative is actively mapping your story.
The ultimate synthesis of these texts is an invitation. In a hypermodern world that is constantly demanding you chase influence, you are invited to choose quiet faithfulness.
Yeah.
In a society that is literally running on the fumes of political and social outrage, you are invited to wield the formidable, active strength of love. These 12 men were not genetically engineered superhumans.
Far from it.
They were remarkably, sometimes embarrassingly ordinary. Their impact came entirely from their willingness to surrender to an extraordinary savior.
They didn't change the trajectory of human history because they possessed perfect resumes. They changed it because they simply chose to accept the invitation to walk forward. So we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day.
Think about this.
We've spent this whole time talking about how God uses flawed people despite their brokenness. But if their biggest, most catastrophic failures actually became the very foundation of their ultimate success, it makes you wonder, what if the modern flaw or the past label you are desperately trying to hide from the world right now isn't a disqualifier at all? What if it is actually the exact, precise tool required for your greatest calling?